Someone once told me the grass is much greener.
A lot of people are watching along with us.
Things are going to be taken a lot further.
It does keep the flow really, really nicely, which makes it a show that was really ahead of its time.
Where's that petrified eyeball at now? Who's had it last?
Macy is amazing, and she doesn't care about what other people think about her.
Don't you feel like maybe Dodie represents the instinctive, animal, ugly part of us?
I might have just been having a bad day when I gave it the map.
At Camp Caprice, priest, we don't sing mooses, we sing these.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side.
Hello, and welcome back to We're in Between, the podcast that discusses an episode of As Told by Ginger once a week, every week. This week we've got Lunatic Lake for you guys. It was the 29th episode of the show. It aired on April 14th, 2002. It was written by Eric Casimiro. And in this episode, Macy and Ginger are nervous about vacationing with Dodie's family to Loon Lake because they feel that Mrs. Bishop is a little intense. Carl and Hoodsey plan to make a movie based on an escaped mental patient that is believed to be hiding in the Loon Lake area. When they sneak out of the cabin in the middle of the night, Joann and the girls go looking for them, only to run into the real lunatic. So, one of the rare episodes where we have sort of the A and B plot happening in the same location the entire time. This episode was also nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program Less Than 1 Hour in 2002.
So right before we discuss about today's episode, we have a lot of comments to read from the various episodes. So we're going to start things off with Trouble in Gal Pal Land. And we're going to start off with the We're in Between forums. So let's kick it off with a comment from this time. Actually, it's Heart Lover 1717. I kept saying 1717, so I completely apologize for that.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice that either, huh?
Yeah, so apologies for that. Okay, and she said, thinking about this episode, I'm trying to remember if I would have had the strength of character to stand up to someone like Miranda at that age. One thing's for certain, there would have been no tolerance for a middle of the night, I can't sleep call, even from folks I liked. So the girls, under the guise of feeling sorry for the suddenly friendless Miranda, had a plan to call the shots and push her around. She won't know what to do without Courtney. She'll be as docile as a lamb. But they don't do any of that. Darren and Lois both call Ginger out on it, with Ginger being in denial, who, after finally building the courage to tell Miranda off, becomes terrified at the thought of their arrangement becoming permanent. And Miranda orders her to get a pager. Thankfully, that didn't come to pass, since Courtney and Miranda are entirely codependent. It was very fun watching the boys wallow in luxury. Poor Blake, they're finally in his world and they still don't include him. Funny how Mrs. Grippling needs to drive every time Winston becomes hysterical with grief and she's lousy at it.
I would have that exact same no tolerance policy for no calls in the middle of the night, and I'm kind of glad we're moving away from like the landline phone era of this show and earlier, where if someone calls you, it's just going to ring and it's going to be loud, whereas now if you don't have a landline, you can just silence that baby and you won't get any calls asking you to read fish magazines in the middle of the night.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, I'm going to go over to the YouTube channel, and we have one from Codebox42. And he says, when you guys were describing the Carl and Hoodsey side plot being your preferred choice of plot, it actually does feel a lot more weight compared to before. What I mean is in season 2, their plots become a lot more open, and I feel like they've improved on them more than season 1. We already have 2 this season that are the best of the show so far, and I feel they do get better later, actually. We have one from TV Mania 2, and this person says, I hate Miranda, but she has some really funny one-liners in this episode that made me really enjoy the episode, including, I never really hated you, just disliked you intensely. That's a big difference. And when she was trying to say something nice, she said, your bedroom isn't nearly as lame as I thought it would be. Phew, I'm never doing that again. Then there's also the part where she whipped Ginger her ponytail. Another Miranda-Squidward comparison in the episode was Macy saying that Miranda was the only person who could make the clarinet sound bitter.
Yeah, I commented on this one. I thought that was such a funny comparison. I'd never thought of Miranda as the Squidward of this show, but she absolutely is.
Yeah, it's exactly. All right, next one is sibling revelry. And we have another comment from HeartLever1717, and this person says, incredibly, after Carl ruins the school septic system, he's not suspended. He's not in charge as a juvenile or put on probation/community service. His mom is not fined and the school remains open. A public building would not be allowed to operate without proper facilities. This always bugs me in this episode, and the rest is a mess, just like you said. Let's see. We have one from Esmeralda to Diamond, and she says, I'm from Sweden, and they go so easy on the kids in the school. They don't have any kind of punishment like detention, and I never heard of this program until I saw the show. I think that the concept sounds good, but overall this episode is a bit boring. It's not one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's fair. It wasn't exactly a standout for me either, but, I do like that we sort of we'll often get different takeaways from listeners that we had on the show. So I think the comments of the YouTube episodes are really helpful and important for us to think about our perspective, because we can end up just agreeing with each other a lot, Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking of which, so apparently a lot of some people, including Frosty Chama, really liked when I reacted to when George was saying to Carl that he wasn't going to leave. And I said, seriously, dude, the program is over, piss off. And they actually want to use it as an audio clip for season 3.
How do you, if with your permission, Patricia, I'm happy to put that in. I think it's awesome.
I mean, sure, why not? It's going to be really interesting. I'll just let you know, because, I mean, usually my clips involve with, talking, genuinely with the episodes or with the character, but me being angry, it's like, okay, that'd be fun.
Kind of a rare moment, yeah.
And going back into Frosty Chama, he actually laughed about, when we were talking about, like, what kind of parties do you go to after graduating from college? We were talking about, like, the lodge clubs and the cheese and wine parties. And he says, side note, cheese and wine goes great with We're in Between.
I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah, me too. Next time.
While recording, while we're listening.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe sometime that, we ever have a chance to sit down together, like if we meet up in person, we should maybe get some Gorgonzola and Chevrolet with a bottle of Pinot Grigio and just sit down and listen to ourselves talk.
Totally. I love it.
That's fantastic. So going into losing Nana Bishop, and we've had a lot of comments regarding losing Nana Bishop. Let's start off with the We're in Between forums, and this is a pretty long one, but every single word of it is well worth it. So we have one from Celeste, aka Cell Rock, and just like Casey and Ashley, she's also seen As Told by Ginger for the very first time, and she's been following along with us week by week, and this is what she says. Hello, my name is Celeste, but you can call me Cell Rock or Celeste. Either one is fine. I've been checking out on the We're in Between podcast each and every week, and it's been a great way to learn about As Told by Ginger and help me get into the series. However, it's taken me until now to finally get an account and post onto the forum, so here I am. What inspired me to finally get into the account? The latest episode that you reviewed, Goodbye Nana Bishop, or Losing Nana Bishop. The episode felt really close home to me, not just when looking at how I related to one single character, but how I related to Macy during Comeback Little Seal Girl, given how we are both naive and young at heart. Or given the recent situation in my family, that I felt a little bit closer when watching Hello Stranger, worrying that my nephew might sadly go through how Ginger felt, because his parents, aka my brother and now ex-sister-in-law, have been separated since he was 2.5 and have officially finalized the divorce just a few weeks ago. However, losing Nana Bishop is concerned. I related to a couple of the characters, in particular Hoodsie and Ginger. I want to point out that I was never close to my extended family, given the fact that most of my mom's family lives in Louisiana, which I moved away at a young age. Most of my dad's family lives in Missouri, which I only visited once or twice in my young age. I now live in Massachusetts and previously lived in Oklahoma. Let's just say that getting to know my extended family, as in grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, hasn't exactly been a real treat when I go to visit my relatives or when they come to visit me. Granted, the bulk of my grandparents passed away before I was born, except for my paternal grandfather, who died when I was at a young age of 4, not having any memories of him. Both of my aunts are deceased by the time of this post, but the one that really hit home for me when watching this episode and listening to your podcast was the death of my cousin, little James. He died in late January of 2003 at the age of 11 when going through complications that arose in a heart transplant surgery, as he was born with a defective heart and he was finally moved up to the list to have the transplant done. Well, I was sad that he will never get to experience teenagehood and adulthood, plus he left behind his parents and 4 younger siblings. What hit hard for me was the aspect of how Ginger felt in this episode, which... at the time, I started talking to my relatives more on the weekends and growing close to them. Just seeing how their day was allowed me to feel more connected, and now I have Facebook. I love that despite my cousins and myself being miles apart, when one of them likes my latest status, it brings a smile to my face, just knowing that I want to know my family better. It shows that we either have something in common or agree to the point I was making, giving us an even closer bond relationship-wise. Now to Hoodsy's perspective. How he felt disconnected emotionally when his grandmother passed away, and in a way awkward because he wasn't close to his grandmother as the rest of his family was. I totally know how he feels. One of my aunts died the following year in 2004, and while I was sad that she passed away, and not just with her death, but with most death that I witnessed, other than the loss of my cat Joey, a hair over a year now, I felt similarly to how Hoodsy felt, and not feeling nearly as sad as the loss of everyone else around me, because my relationship with the person in question wasn't as close as everyone else. I often felt awkward when I attended funerals or wakes, unsure of how to act or what to say. However, just as Hoodsy realized how much he missed his grandmother when he talked about her in the funeral, it took me much longer to realize how much I would miss my aunt who had passed away. There we go. From mid to late 2004 until about 6 months later in March 2005, when I got to perform at the All-States Chorus, and we had our performance at the Symphony Hall in Boston, Massachusetts, late one night after rehearsals before a concert the following day, which fell on my uncle's birthday, and the uncle by marriage who married my recently deceased aunt. I learned from my mom that she and her sisters were always singing in choirs, whether at my church or at school, and my Aunt Anne was in particular dedicated to her singing. She would have been so proud of me making it to the All-State Chorus and getting to sing at Symphony Hall the senior year of high school. I wanted to pick up my cell phone and give her a call, telling her about everything that I've been going through, and that's when it hit me hard. She was dead. I couldn't tell her. I believed I cried a good long time that night, and I might have cried myself to sleep. I can't remember now if I did or not, but that moment hit me hard, that I really missed my aunt, and I was sorry that she wasn't alive. So far, the show presented itself with so many things I was able to relate to. When it comes to the subject of death, this one can be hard to come by, and it felt nice that once I could relate to 2 of the characters in this particular episode, the title character and one of the side characters. I look forward to seeing what else this series has in store as we go along, in particular more Macy-centric episodes, because I do believe she's probably one of my favorite characters. Thank you for taking the time for reading my comment, and I look forward to more episodes of We're in Between in the future. And Patricia, Casey, and Ashley, I agree with you. I give losing Nana Bishop a super yay.
Wow, yeah. Thank you, Celeste, for your comments. You're one of our most active listeners on We're in Between and on FNN, so we really appreciate the amount of thought and effort that you put into that post. That was really interesting to read.
Absolutely. So going over to the Old Schooling YouTube channel, we have one from Animation Meh, and this person, and she says, this episode was a super yay for me as well. I watched this episode over and over, not knowing the concept of death in this family until a few months back. One day when I was leaving the bus shuttle and my mother picked me up from school, which is odd because she rarely picks me up at school, she took me home and she told me that my grandfather died. I never knew my grandfather that well, although I remember sitting on his lap when I was younger once. I felt like Hoodsy for a little while, until we head to the funeral where I bursted into tears. It just hurts me not knowing him because he was always sick at the hospital. Till this day, I still kind of regret it.
Yeah, clearly this episode strikes a chord with a lot of people, myself included, and we really appreciate you guys sharing your very personal stories on here. We love hearing from you guys.
Yeah. Just one more from this one. So we have Magical Peach Internet, and this person says, I reviewed this episode for my channel last year to reflect my feelings about my aunt passing. Now that my own Nana passed away this year, this episode's resonate with me a lot on a closer level. Dodie and Patricia were my spirit animals in this episode. Thank you very much for that, Magical Peach Internet. Really do appreciate on that one. All right, so yeah, that's it for Losing Nana Bishop. For those, if we didn't read off your comments, then don't worry, because we really did read all of your comments, and we really do appreciate you guys sharing your story about how much this episode meant a lot to you. All right, last but certainly not least, we have our Friday the 13th episode, TGIF. We have one from Joshua Moore, who says, it's a decent episode, not one of my favorites, but it was relatable enough because, like Ginger, I encountered problems when I was younger of how embarrassing my family can be, and I still do as an adult. We have another comment from HeartLover1717, and she says, another takeaway is that our public and private selves are different. Hoodsy and Carl are BFFs, but remember how Hoodsy asked Carl to take his shoes off if he was busy with his evening routine and finishing homework and looking forward to watching TV with his dad. Carl, growing up with a one full-time, hard-working parent, was unfamiliar with this type of family bonding and or cooperative family effort. He was just as bored at the Bishops as Ginger was at the Griplings. Also, Ginger is fortunate that Lois has a huge measure of patience and understanding. Even though she's reacting like a normal teen, not many mothers would have tolerated her rude attitude or allowed her to stay elsewhere as they were trying to figure things out. Lois truly knows her daughter after all. I really like how they both apologize to each other. It's hard enough for Ginger as she's figuring out who she is, and Lois gets that just because she is comfortable and confident doesn't mean that Ginger is there yet. I appreciate that Lois never plays the "because I'm your mother, that's why" card.
This is one of my favorite comments in our history of the show. I especially love the paragraph about the public versus private self with Hoodsy and Carl, which is such a common thing for especially boys that age, but certainly for everybody, that we have sort of the person we want people to see us as and who we actually are when we're either at home with our family or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And finally, we have our last comment of this episode, and it's from Norbert, and he says, hey, Patricia, Casey, and Ashley, let's talk about TGIF. It was a decent episode, nothing spectacular, but still amusing to watch. I especially love how Carl loves Friday the 13th and wants to get bad luck. Typical Carl. I can definitely see why Friday the 13th is his favorite holiday, considering his Christmas wish was, it never came true, at least until an Even Steven holiday special, though I feel like Halloween should be a second because I can see Carl loving candy and wanting to get it for free from neighbors, but I digress. The Fowleys get hit hard in this episode. Their entire house is closed due to a mold breaking loose. Yikes. At least they get on the news and they get to ride to school with the Griplings, and Ginger gets to go to their house. So I guess Carl's right. Bad luck can lead up to good luck. Speaking of which, Casey, Ashley, keep your eye on Buzz. He'll be coming back a couple of times on the show. As a matter of fact, his next appearance is only 2 episodes away. And also, one more thing is that basically he promoted a game in honor of the Nicktoons 26th anniversary. And it's on sporkle.com/games/pocketbook/rocks/Nicktoons characters. Basically, it's one of those games in which you get to see if you can type in and identify as much Nicktoon characters as you can at a certain time limit. If you're interested, you can check out the forums, or you can follow him on Twitter at @SNorbertD1. If you want to share your score with him, then please send him a screenshot. And that's all he has to say. So once again, thank you so much for all of your wonderful comments, everybody. This month in particular, we've had a lot of genuine, heartfelt, and thoughtful comments.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And Norbert, I will be taking your quiz today. I'll send you a tweet soon.
All right. Well, that is it, everybody. Tune in next month as we'll be reading more of your comments about the 4 episodes we'll be discussing about this month. So until then, enjoy the rest of the episode.
And with us, we have Eric Molinsky, who was a storyboard artist, one of 3 on this episode. So that's super exciting. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess we can get things started. So the episode begins with Macy giving a presentation about Crazy Floyd, the lunatic who had recently escaped from a mental institution, and he is currently in an unknown unknown whereabouts in Loon Lake. And Ms. Zorsky is asking about why is Macy making a report about this. And she says, well, the reason why is because we're going to Loon Lake, and this focuses on what happened. This actually is focusing on my real experiences. And Ms. Zorsky looks at the newspaper and says, Macy, this isn't a newspaper. This is a tabloid. This probably isn't as real as the two-headed alien baby. And then Macy's like, oh, that wasn't true. And yeah, we have Macy actually believing in it, which, you know, it's to be expected from Macy because she's so naive and pure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the next thing that we can focus on is that we have Carl and Hoodsy carrying around a camera, and their subject is Blake, and they want to make a home movie / documentary about Blake because their next subject is survival of the fittest. Is he going to be able to survive out into the wilderness? And Blake tells him that he's going to go to Loon Lake and he's going to survive on his own for 48 hours. And Carl and Hoodsy want to take this as an advantage point so they can be able to impersonate as the lunatic so they can scare him out for their home movie.
Yeah, I will say, generally speaking, I had very high hopes for this one when I saw the Emmy nomination. I shouldn't have looked at that before I watched the episode, but it absolutely lived up to that, so I was really happy to see. This was already definitely a favorite of mine. I, as the listeners know, have not watched the show all the way through. Patricia has, so I'm sort of having it revealed to me episode by episode, and I thought this was a really significant sort of mid-season check-in on all of the various characters we've been dealing with for the last 29 episodes now.
I remember I wasn't in the recording session, but I remember hearing that the actress who played Dodie's mother was a little concerned that her character was so one note, and she was wondering if she could add more nuance to it. And I remember hearing, this is just people were telling me how the discussions went, and they just said, this is very much about a kid's point of view. When you're a kid, sometimes you have some teacher or some parent that you just think are mean, and maybe years later as an adult you realize, oh, they were going through personal issues or whatever. But your child's perspective is you're scared of this teacher, you're scared of this parent, and they really wanted to kind of capture that point of view. But then at the end, I added, just skip ahead, I added that little bit where she gives Hoodsy a hug. I felt like, because I remember hearing that story, and I thought, well, at least I could humanize her a little bit in the way we animate.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great compromise, because there are parents just like Joann Bishop. She's a little caricature-y, but I think we all knew somebody like her growing up. But it was also nice to remind us that, she is still a complicated human being, just like all of the other characters on the show.
Yeah, and deep down there's concern. She's, worried about her son who's alone in the woods.
Right, and yeah, not without reason. And she's a little hesitant to be thrilled about Carl Foutley, which is, again, not without reason.
Yeah, so throughout the series, at this point in time, Joann and Carl haven't exactly gotten along. Because if you remember from Sleep On It, Carl was the one responsible for scaring away Joann's book club when he released the rotten eggs. Then we had in Losing Nana Bishop, where, they bought the shackles and the iron mask, and Hoodsy ended up wearing the iron mask to their grandmother's funeral. And, of course, with Deja Vu, when Hoodsy got amnesia, Joann wanted Hoodsy to stay far away from Carl as possible, wanted him for being friends with Brandon. So, yeah, we see that when Hoodsy begs his mom for him to come over to the vacation at Loon Lake, she absolutely refuses. She says, absolutely not. Carl is a bad influence on you. And then we have, Hoodsy's father coming along and says, oh, let the boy come, Joann. What's one more mouth to feed gonna hurt? And then, she says, I'll tell you what, that one boy is Carl Foutley. And yeah, I get it that Carl is a bit of a troublemaker at times, but yeah, in this episode, this is like her most over-the-top acting with her being really hateful for Carl. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit more later about the trip. But, yeah, so eventually she gets convinced to let Carl come to the trip, and then she has that look of she immediately regrets it. And so now Carl is going to be coming along for the trip so that they can be able to scare off Blake. And then we have the girls who are not excited to be going to this trip because they know about how eccentric and how extreme that Joann can be. And Lois gives off great advice as usual, saying that, be there for your friend Dodie.
Yeah, I've always loved Lois's Boston accent too. I mean, being from Boston originally, and working in LA. I know the show was supposed to take place in Connecticut, and they would try to make it New England centric. And I remember this was a decision the actress made on her own. She came up with the backstory for Lois. She's like, well, I've decided she's like a working class, from working class Boston, and they're like class is something we talked about a lot behind the scenes too, in terms of the idea that Ginger comes from a working class family, and that of course it plays out on the show in terms of the story, but we would think about it too in terms of design. Macy's parents being a bit more professional, Dodie being more middle class, and so yeah, it's interesting the way and of course Courtney being on the top of the echelon there, but it's something we thought about, and we put it into the drawings, and we put it into everything a lot.
Yeah, and of course, when Macy asked Mrs. Foutley's like, why can't moms be more like you, Miss F? And then she says, because there's not enough spandex in the world.
I know.
Such a good line. She's got a lot of good kind of comedy zingers in this episode. Like, as they're pulling away on the way to Loon Lake, Dodie, I believe it is, says, wish you were coming with us, Mrs. Foutley, and she's smiling, waving to them, and she goes, I'd sooner pull my teeth out with a wrench. Cracked me up.
And she's smiling in the way that you can see all of her teeth, like,
yeah.
Yeah, so another one that she says right before, we go over to the trip, when she's watching the news report about, Crazy Floyd, and then she at the end of this, she says, put that in a jumpsuit and you have Joann Bishop.
Yes.
All right, so yeah, can we talk about this? Let's talk about the trip, like the drive, and with her being incredibly like itsy with going over to a different road because the police blocked it, and then having the boys having to go onto a bathroom break, and throughout this entire thing, she's constantly complaining and saying like, I need to pay attention to the road, don't speak to me, don't say loud words and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, she is like really intense in this episode, probably more so than we've ever seen at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big joke was that she was the monster. I mean, that was always what we were building towards, was that, it wasn't Crazy Floyd, it was her that was from the perspective of the kids. That's why we made her get more and more kind of disheveled in the way that we drew her, and the point of view with the flashlight under her face. I mean, again, I'm jumping ahead, but it's definitely something that we were kind of building towards, the idea that she's the monster from the kids' point of view.
For sure. And this is a little bit of a sidebar, but I'm always here for Mr. Bishop. Something about him cracks me up. I think it's partially what a pushover he is, and partially just how much he looks like Hoodsy.
Yeah. By the way, that family that walks by when they're at the clam shack or the clam place, that like albino looking family, that was actually a mistake.
Do tell.
They were supposed to be, I think in the script it said it was this perfect blonde family. Like, it's that feeling like when you're on a trip and you see this family that looks absolutely perfect and you're like, oh, my family's a disaster. Why don't I have a family like that one? But, the way it would work then is we would draw the storyboards, and and then you would do the colors and everything, and you ship it to Korea, and it would come back like 3 or 4 months later, and it was always like a crapshoot whether they got anything wrong. I mean, I did a Rugrats once where I made I was drawing a worm too big that Phil and Lil were fighting over, and it came back from Korea and was the size of a snake, and the whole crew laughed at me. But anyway, they came back and they looked like this like an albino family, and they were walking in this very strange way, and everyone just started laughing. And I remember the executive producer was like, keep it. And I'm like, that's so weird and freaky. Like, don't, because, we would send a lot of things back to be fixed. So that's not what we intended. But at that point, they're just like, that's so funny. We have to keep it as it is.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that does beg the question for me. How much of a feedback loop was there between writing and animation? Like, would you guys just send things back and forth until you agreed, or how did that work?
No, the scripts were completely done. In fact, when we would get the script, we would also get, I'm really dating myself, we'd get a cassette tape of the actors. And you would just, you read, you knew what your section was, and you'd be coordinated with the other two storyboard artists, and you'd be working all under the same director. It was always, because there are 2 commercial breaks, it was always 3 board artists. Each of you takes one of the sections between the commercial breaks. And so I was very excited that they cast me basically to do that, the third section. But and then you listen to that cassette tape over and over again. And when I was just listening to the episode earlier, I was just thinking, like, even though we probably made that episode in 2001, because it took a long time to put together, so there's no question that I was probably working on that episode a year before it came out. I mean, given how long ago that was, every line of dialogue to me, it's like buried deep into my brain.
Right.
Even the parts that weren't, the section I storyboarded. I mean, I knew every intonation. It's just weird. Like, it's almost like when you hear some song you used to love, and right before the lyric comes on, something in your head is like, I know exactly what the singer's about to say. So that's how it would work. And then you would pitch it. You would do sketches, like little thumbnail sketches, and you would then, you'd be with the executive producer and the director, and you'd kind of pitch your section to them, and you'd be like, okay, so this is it. We're gonna have like a shot from like behind the tree, and then the camera's gonna zoom in, and then you sort of like, you kind of excitedly pitch out your sequence from just a kind of cinematic point of view, and then they give you a lot of notes.
Cool.
Yeah, and then you spend the next like 4 weeks just executing it, because I mean, now they have these animation discs that are digitized, so you can kind of like take a Wacom tablet. You would pick up like from the character sheet, the character, plop it in there, twist, change it how you want. But we had to draw everything from scratch, and I can even sometimes recognize different storyboard artists when I see the finished cartoon, because I remember we all drew them a little differently.
Now, let me ask you, Eric, do you still have some of the storyboards from all the shows that you did?
Not all of them, but those are, I'm looking at them right now on my shelf.
Oh, wow. You definitely have to send us pictures. I would love to put it up for everybody to see on the forums.
Sure.
If you're willing.
Yeah, if you're willing,
fine.
of
I mean,
course.
it's property of Klasky Chupa, which doesn't, I don't even know if they exist anymore. They're Xeroxes, they're not originals. But I Xeroxed all my boards for nostalgia's sake, and there's only a couple of them that I kept that were my favorites, and this was one of them. It's on my top shelf up there.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When you give me the picture for the storyboards that you did for Lunatic Lake, I'll definitely share it on the forums.
Okay, and I remember, in fact, when I pitched Lunatic Lake, I played Stravinsky's Firebird for dramatic effect.
That's great.
Okay, so while the boys are using the bathroom, they're taking advantage of, so they can be able to get shots for their documentary. So, Carl puts on the mask, and, he's scaring, people who are driving behind the cars, and they go over to the clam restaurant, and he picks up a bucket of fried clams for Joann, and, she starts slowly warming up to Carl, saying like, oh, maybe he's not a bad kid after all, because I love fried clams. And so then she starts eating them, and she offers to everybody, but they don't want to eat it, and except for Hoodsie, because why not? And so then when they finally reach over to the cabin, the girls start looking around, and they see the lake, and they see the mountains, and Dodie starts telling stories like, oh, this was where I first saw the snapping turtle, this is where I broke my arm when I was 3, this is where the trees are for collecting the sap. So Yeah, she's having a great time showing her friends about all the places that she loves to go to. And then we have Joann, who's incredibly stressed. She's saying, like, I'm a one-woman, chef over here. I'm the one who's making all these sandwiches, and you're off, doing all these traveling and whatever. Go and help me out and blah, 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 blah. So, while they're helping setting up the table, Ginger has in her mind that, deep down inside, I'm not having a good time because Joann has not made us feel welcome, especially with Carl. And it becomes apparent because this is when she gets sick from food poisoning from the fried clams.
Mm-hmm.
So meanwhile that night, Carl and Hoodsie decide to sneak out, and they're going to go try to find Blake so they can, scare him away. And what they ended up is that they find a skunk, and they get chased up into a tree, and they're not moving from their position, and they're thinking that they're in a bad situation because now they're stuck. Joann is definitely going to freak out, and they're pretty much just the skunk is just not moving whatsoever. And then eventually Joann does find this out, and she becomes incredibly angry regarding Carl, and Ginger has to defend Carl, saying that he's not rotten, Mrs. Bishop. He has a good side. You just have to give him a chance, which I think that this is definitely much more in character for Ginger as opposed to the episode that we talked about, Sibling Revelry, in which, she wanted to keep her, her club with the Big Brother, Big Sister program, and she was willing to sacrifice even Carl's unhappiness so that the club can stay going. So I think that this is definitely more in character.
Yeah, let me ask you guys a question, because I remember the time, too, they did some audience research with the kids who were really into the show, and they found that, in the same way that Carl and Ginger are living in these, parallel worlds, the kids were, too, and a lot of the girls just didn't even understand why Carl and Hoodsie were on the show. They felt like this would be such a better show if there was no Carl and Hoodsie, and some of the guys were some of the boys were like, I like Carl and Hoodsie, but why are they stuck in this girl show? And it was kind of a weird, I think that the network was in a little bit of a strange pickle in that sense, because they knew how to market so clearly the what the other shows were about. But that's the thing that we loved about the show, was that especially when you have a boy who, is Carl supposed to be 10 or something?
Yeah,
11?
In this season, Carl is 10 years old.
Yeah, and she's 13? I mean, that's like when you have a brother and sister at that such different ages of childhood development. What is important to you is so radically different, especially a boy and a girl, and that's what we loved. But I don't know, what did you, as kids, I assume you're kids when you watched this, what was your reaction to those two different worlds?
I was 14 when I saw the show, and I can tell you that I liked both of them because I actually did an analysis video discussing about As Told by Ginger called Why As Told by Ginger was a groundbreaking yet overlooked Nicktoon. And I discussed about that the reason why the show was so great, in my opinion, was because it focused on two different perspectives. In a lot of slice of life cartoons, they always focus on one main character and their friends. And, with the exception of maybe Hey Arnold, in which it would focus on other characters, but that was more like the exception than the rule. A lot of the shows, you have Doug, you have Lloyd in Space, you have maybe occasionally, all these other shows. I mean, sure, you have, a group of friends, but then maybe some kids will be more focused than others. But with As Told by Ginger, you have the two different perspectives. If you don't like one of them, you can always go to the other one, which I think is a great balance. It's like you said, the boys like the Carl and Hoodsie plot, the girls like the Ginger plot. So, we even interviewed Melissa, just a few minutes ago, and we were talking about how, that it was the kind of show that a bunch of people can gather up together. We had this one guy who said that I liked watching the show with my mom and my grandmother. We can be able to watch the show together. So, yeah, it does actually bring in multiple people to come in together, as opposed to, a show that was a Nicktoon at the time, in which it only focuses on one general audience. In fact, I even made that statement in my video. It's ever since Klasky Chupo created Rugrats, all the other shows that they created focus on one specific audience. If you liked Our Real Monsters, that means that most likely you were a boy who liked gross out humor. If you liked Rocket Power, most likely you were a kid who liked skateboarding or snowboarding or surfing. If you liked the Wild Thornberrys, most likely you were a person who liked animals and nature shows. So yeah, basically with As Told by Ginger, I feel that both boys and girls can be able to watch it, and if they don't like one thing, then they can always just stick to the other.
Yeah, theoretically, I mean, that should, yeah, I mean, That's exactly, how I how I felt, how we all felt. It was a little frustrating for us, though, because we felt like this was such a great show we were putting together. It was never quite given the same kind of attention and appreciation that we thought it kind of deserved, because I think there was a sense of a lot of people didn't know what to do with it, unfortunately, or exactly they didn't. Not everybody, unfortunately, had that holistic approach to appreciating the show.
And it saddens me, because I think where that market research comes from is parents teaching kids gender norms to an extent that isn't helpful. To me, As Told by Ginger probably appeals more to young girls. I liked it growing up, and I had friends who liked it growing up. I think that Nickelodeon often played it safe by always going with male protagonists for the vast majority of their shows. Ginger was a straying from that, and it was a risk, as was, Wild Thornberries, and I'm sure there are others.
As of right now, there are only 4 or 5 Nicktoons that have female protagonists. There's Eliza Thornberry, Ginger Foutley, Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot.
Right, who's a robot, yeah.
Yeah, Bessie Higginbottom from The Mighty Bee, and Cora from The Legend of Korra. That's it.
Right.
Out of over 30 plus Nicktoons, only 5 of them have female protagonists.
I never felt growing up like Carl and Hoodsie were out of place, to answer your initial question. It just felt like another part of the world. And, I only had brothers as siblings, but you don't have the same set of experiences as your siblings because you're at different ages at the same time. I liked that Carl and Ginger are having radically different experiences while living in the same house and having a pretty impressive communicative relationship, and I think that's thanks to Lois, that they're a great family, and that kind of brings the show together.
Yeah, and I just love the idea of what is important to you at the age of 10 versus what is important to you at the age of 13, and there's always that moment when they look at each other and it's like, how can you think that's important? The other one would be like, how can you think that's important? And yet they realize that they need each other to solve their whatever problem it is. That's where I felt like the show is always at its best.
Totally, and especially in an episode like this where they all are kind of stuck together on this trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing to answer your question, Eric, about, why the show didn't really catch on. Again, I mentioned in that video that As Told by Ginger was mostly dramatic. And at the same time, around the time that the show was out, we had SpongeBob, we had the Fairly Odd Parents, we had Chalk Zone and Danny Phantom, and all these things. They were all comedic. All of these shows that were out before As Told by Ginger and during the time have always been about making people laugh and, focusing on gags and adult jokes. And I even knew some people, I was in high school when I saw the show, and everybody that I knew in high school was getting into Invader Zim because it felt like it was a show that they can connect to because it was for a more older audience. So, at the time that I knew about some people, they said that, the reason why I don't like it is because why would I watch a show that of something that I'm going through right now? It's like, I'm going to school, they're going to school, why would I want to watch this?
Yeah, actually, I could see that. I think at their age, I probably felt the same way, sadly enough.
Yeah. And, and of course with our listeners from the forums, now a lot of them are appreciating As Told by Ginger. They tell us a whole bunch of, comments about the episodes and their favorite characters and their favorite moments. So it's like, it's like with ever since the airings of all of the episodes on Nick Splat and, even to some extent, when I did As Told by Ginger month almost 2 years ago, and even this podcast, is that As Told by Ginger is starting to, bring the audience that was loving the show the first time and maybe even getting some new ones.
That's great. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I remember we would have discussions back then about, we were all obsessed with our own things in our own childhood. And we were talking about, these kids are going to grow up and they're going to actually probably appreciate this more. And I'm going to be really curious. I remember saying, back in 2001 and 2, I wonder when these kids grow up, what they're going to create around these shows. Because we were at the time, of course, creating so much culture and things around the things that we grew up with. So it's kind of funny to, see that happen.
Yeah, and the more serious shows are, I think, more recognized. Not that Hey Arnold wasn't successful in its own right, but the shows, my co-host Ashley and I do a podcast about Nicktoons from our era growing up in general, and Hey Arnold and As Told by Ginger are two of the ones that our listeners seem to respond to the most now.
Yeah, and we were in a totally different building. We were on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, which was kind of cool. And then Nickelodeon was in Burbank, and we had nothing to do with them. I mean, it was practically, we knew that we were all in the same network, but it was like two totally different studios, which is kind of
wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so I guess that with that with you separating from Nickelodeon, that means that probably you had a little bit more creative freedom than probably all the other Nicktoons at that point.
Yes. No, actually, I'm remembering now that you would particularly care, but I'm like, no, it was Sunset Boulevard. I remember, it was Sunset Boulevard, actually, I'm remembering. We did. I mean, there was a lot of pride at the time that Klasky Csupo was an independent studio that happened to have this relationship with Nickelodeon. But there was a strong, fierce sense of independence. And the fact that we were in LA, I think that there was a sense that we were a little bit more grounded towards the city, towards kind of the grittiness or edginess of everyday life. That area has become much more fancy now than it was back then. Back then, it was still kind of coming back from the bad old days. And Burbank was, it felt very much like this gigantic outdoor mall. And so, I think we were kind of proud that we were just a teeny bit more anchored in the grittiness of the city.
All right. That sounds really interesting, Eric.
Nice.
All right, so continuing on with the episode. So
yes.
now that Joann found out that Carl and Hoodsie are missing, she decides to go along with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy to find Carl and Hoodsie, even though that she's sick in her stomach, she's not feeling really well, and she even has like these beady eyes. I guess this is the part where you started storyboarding, because this is like the third of the episode.
Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, we have these beady eyes from Joann when she shines the flashlight in her face, and she said, "Listen up, Deirdre Hortense. This is what separates me from your father. Your father's packing, and I'm out there going to look for, your brother and that spawn of demon, Carl Foutley." And so then she goes over to the cabin, and she sees the bloodhound, and she knocks on the door, and lo and behold, it's Crazy Floyd. And yeah, he is like walking around like a dog. He's barking, and then Joann has like absolutely no clue about it, because I take it that she didn't watch the news reports or even listen to it on the radio, because she wants everything quiet. So she pays the man the money so that they can be able to borrow the bloodhound, and she starts looking around with finding Carl and Hoodsie, and it seems like the bloodhound has absolutely no idea where she's going, because she's dragging Joann all over the place, and more that we see of her, she's covered in mud.
Although we do have, she does give one of the shirts to the bloodhound, for the bloodhound to, I think it's like Hoodsie's shirt that the bloodhound smells.
Oh, okay.
That was my I think we added that in for logic's sake. But I remember as I watched it just earlier, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I had the dogs smell the sweatshirt.
Right. I'm jumping ahead a bit, but my biggest takeaway and kind of shocking moment to this episode, similar to when Maude comes back as a ghost, the sort of, oh, they went there moment, the lunatic is real. He exists, and he's really out there. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, that was another thing that we were just like, wow, are we really doing this? Like, we're really having an actual, like, scary lunatic? I mean, and we were just told to just go all out. I mean, they'll make this a horror movie.
And it's even set up, like, Macy realizing, like, so she's reading this tabloid in class, and I forget, maybe it's Dodie. Someone explains to her that tabloids just make stuff up all the time, and she goes, oh, the mockery, and kind of throws it on the ground. But so it's sort of set up like, oh, he might not really be there, and then there, lo and behold.
Yeah, it's funny too, because the other thing we would do is we would storyboard it, and you would kind of time it out, but then you would then give it to animation timers, who would add all sorts of little flares, like when his the pupils suddenly like shake back and forth in his eyes, like that was something that the animation timers added that I was like, oh, that's hysterical. I didn't even think about that. I just could have a big close up on him, but having him walk on all fours, that was really fun to draw.
Yeah, so then we go over to where Blake is at, and he is scared out of his mind when Joann points the flashlight and saying, "Where are they?" And he's like frightened. He's like, "No, please don't hurt me." And he's like, I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for the others." And then he just runs away crying and screaming. She's going completely insane. She's probably, I mean, it's even a debate on who's more insane, her or the lunatic.
Oh, yeah. And we had a lot of fun, too, with the idea of, I mean, one thing that we took from, the Rugrats kind of established the Klasky Csupo style to some extent, which is like put the camera anywhere, put it inside. I mean, we have it, I think earlier it's inside the clam bucket. That was a brilliant bit of storyboarding. I forget if that was Tron or Max who did that section, but, you put it inside the mouth of, the classic one was inside the mouth of one of the Rugrats was a classic, kind of thing to do. But, for this one, too, I remember I enjoyed the idea of cutting to the wide shot and having them like walk across Scooby-Doo style, like just like flat walking across the screen and going from that, so like you cut out to see the absurdity of it. And then you have like sort of Blake's point of view where you have this extreme, difference of perspective where the dog's face is filling up like half the screen and she's standing behind there. So I remember playing with that a lot to sort of when you should be freaked out or disturbed versus when you should be laughing at what's going on.
Yeah. Casey, I want to know your take on how Dodie was acting in this episode, because I know a lot of our followers are going to be asking this question. So, yeah, apparently, even with Ginger in this episode, she talks about, like, oh, Dodie's giving a whole bunch of excuses for her mom's attitude. And then when they're looking for Carl and Hoodsy in the woods, she even says, oh, it would have been so much better if we didn't bring your brother along. So it's like, man, not only is Hoodsy missing, but Carl is missing as well. And, they could be in severe danger. And, it would have been nice if maybe Dodie was a little bit more sympathetic.
Right. Okay, well, I'm always, I guess, a Dodie apologist, so take that with a grain of salt, but how I feel, okay, first of all, they have this conversation where Dodie is basically explaining to Ginger in the car, and the conversation is pretty much, here's how you talk to my mom, or it might be before the car ride, I'm getting it a little mixed up, but they have this conversation, and I think that's so real, that when you're a kid, you sort of have to coach your friends on how to interact with your family when you're in a confined space with them for a while. So that all made sense. I think most of Dodie's quirks are explained by her family, and especially by her mom. I don't think she's the greatest friend in the world in this episode, but at the same time, Carl did get Hoodsy into trouble. At the end of the day, this is kind of on Carl, right?
Yeah, it is kind of on Carl, because we see that Hoodsy is remotely not interested in doing it. I mean, we even see, like, when they reach over to the cabin, he's like, Carl, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we can reenact it. And he's like, no, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Let's go out and scare Blake. It's like, yeah, so all of this is Carl's fault.
Yeah, I think it also, though, it's another thing, too, is very true when you're a kid, is that it's like the old saying about, like, you can call my, fill the name of, I can call my parent, sister, brother, whatever, an idiot, but don't you dare do it, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think that's where Dodie has this kind of tribal allegiance to her family, even though she knows that, Ginger's in the right in many of these cases. I think that Dodie's really struggling, and I'm kind of on Team Dodie there too.
And Ginger has this great quote in her diary later where she says, "Even though I knew Carl was guilty of stuff, I knew I had to defend him." Maybe that's why Dodie was making so many excuses for her mom. I think that captures exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so I guess we can start wrapping things up. So eventually Dodie apologizes to Ginger about what she said, and Ginger accepts the apology and they become friends again. And of course Macy has to be amazing as always when she finds the sap all over the buckets and said, hey, we should open up a pancake house.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then they find, Carl and Hoodsy trapped in the tree, and Joann is, like, really, really angry at this point. And so, while, she demands for them to come down, then crazy Floyd comes down and says, okay, you've had her long enough. Where's Princess Esmeralda? And then she said, oh, yeah, your dog. I'm sorry. Yeah, she chased the skunk. It's like, you let a princess wander around these woods? And then he starts barking, and then they find out, oh, man, it's the lunatic. And so Macy grabs the sap and throws it into Joann, covering all over her.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember even in my drawings, I think I made it even more horror movie looking. I remember when it came back, I was disappointed. I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what I expected, but I was like really drawing it like a horror movie.
I thought it totally works though for what it's supposed to be, and we.
Yeah, and then like I said, I added that extra part where, although looking at it again, I was like, Jesus, I had Hootsie drop down like the entire tree. I was like, I should, like he literally just drops the tree. I'm like, he would have broken his ankles. Like I should have had him at least swing or something.
Carl's toughened him up. He's so
exactly. He has super strong ankles. And but that little hug moment, that was that was. I remember when I did that, like the EP and the director were just like, yeah. I get it. Like, why that totally works.
It was just simple enough to not be heavy-handed. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the last beat of this episode. It just warmed my heart. Mama Foutley giving her all in this movie that she's acting for because they're completing their film in a reduced set. They're in their backyard, but she is committing to this scene. And Carl he's such a perfectionist that I really identified with Carl as a kid. His like weird sort of perfectionism of just needing to get everything right, and her getting so frustrated with him. I just love that whole moment.
That's funny. Really, you identify with Carl as a kid?
I was not a troublemaker in any way, but I identified with his like passion and his weird side projects that change by the week. That was very much what I was into.
I always loved his vocabulary too. I mean, I feel like he has this reputation as being a troublemaker, but he is a smart kid.
We love on the podcast, we call it when they go full capitalist a couple times in the show, when they're good little entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it could have been so easy for Carl to be a troublemaker and have no depth whatsoever. But yeah, we have Carl, and not only is he sort of a troublemaker, but he has his heart in the right place, and what he's doing, it's either for the benefit of others or he wants to be able to make it big out there. Which, if you're a kid, you want to be able to, try to see if you can make it out into the world, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that should be the end of this episode. So yeah, once again, when you were talking earlier about that the episode was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Program in less than half an hour, I found out what episode won the Emmy, and that was the Futurama episode Roswell That Ends Well.
It's so good.
Yeah, which one was that?
That was the episode in which Fry goes back in time to 1947, and he meets up with his grandma, and he accidentally kills his grandfather, and it just ends up being incredibly convoluted with him ending up being his own grandfather.
Right. I think that's what they're going to die. They announced to Zoidberg they're going to dissect him, and they describe how horribly they're going to do it. He's like, "Oh boy!" Yeah. Well,
it's a great moment of continuity for the show. They go for one of his hearts, and he goes, "Take, I have 4," and then like 2 seasons later, they're doing some sort of surgery on him, and he only has 3 hearts.
Oh, nice.
Because they took his 4th one.
Yeah, we all had continuity supervisors. I mean, there were people who their entire job on the show was just to like notice that kind of stuff, and they're on every show.
Right. Well, we talk about a lot. We love the continuity of As Told by Ginger, with, like, Ginger's police record gets brought up a lot. That petrified eyeball is always in the works.
Yeah, Jim Duffy, who is one of the producers at Klasky, who was overseeing a lot of the shows, that was a big deal for him, especially with Rocket Power, but with a lot of the other, like Rocket Power, there was a map of the whole town. I mean, he felt like he wanted you to have this sense that this was a real place you could go to, and how far away are these like to really ground it in a very physical world was incredibly important to him. And even when we would do those crazy perspectives, he would drill it into us to make sure that at least like the distances between the characters was realistic, as much as we were stretching the perspectives. And we discussed, like, do the kids even notice that kind of thing? And he'd be like, no, they do, they will, even if they don't know it, they'll feel it.
Yeah, I mean, we even
sure,
talked
for
about
sure.
a few weeks ago when we talked about losing Nana Bishop, about how just a small detail like the squirrels. If you watch Never Can Say Goodbye, you see a squirrel enter in from the roof and you see the squirrel disappear. And then you realize there was a whole bunch of squirrels that were in the attic and it just led up to that thing. So it's like even something minute would lead up to something, would lead up to a big payoff at the end.
Well, remember the character of Noelle, who comes up much later? She...
Well, we don't want to say anything spoiler-reef because Casey hasn't seen the show in its entirety.
Okay, well, there's a character...
I will say I've seen that character before.
Yes, you have. So that character, we would get incidentals, for classrooms and stuff like that, and that the character designers would draw. And that particular character, people thought was so funny, like just the character itself, and that we would, the storyboard artists, it became like a running thing of where else could you put that character. And I forget what she was like. I think for a while we only knew her as like number 67 or whatever. And then it was like, and then the writers started learning that we were doing that, and then they suddenly made her this major character, and that was kind of a cool thing. It's just because we all liked the design of that character so much.
Yeah, and it's just so crazy to think that Emily herself was the voice of it.
Right.
That's right. I remember, that was funny. I remember when that was announced. It was,
All right. So, I think that's pretty much it for our discussion of this episode. So, Eric, at the end of every episode, we always give a ranking of yay, nay, or meh. And since you did work on this episode as a storyboard artist, and you even told me that this was your personal favorite, I assume you're going to give it a yay.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, what about you, Casey?
I'm probably overusing them at this point, but this one has earned it. This one is going to be a super yay from me. I think it's my 5th or 6th, but certainly one of the top episodes of the show and a standout in my book.
Yeah, the only thing is, my favorite, because, the other fun thing about being a storyboarder is that you get to do the acting for the characters, and you really, and you don't really think about it, but there's a lot of acting involved. Especially I had a lot of fun with Carl and Hoodsie in the tree, in terms of the part where Hoodsie's like, oh, that was so much fun to draw that. And but I gotta say, Courtney was always my favorite character to draw in terms of the acting, and that was the one regret with this episode. I didn't get to do any Courtney drawings because I always loved playing up her kind of innocence.
Right, and that's sort of very poised, and she's very naive, but also a little bit knows what she's doing,
Yeah, because initially she was just the rich girl that, the rich popular girl. But, I liked the nuances we started adding to her after a while. She was really fun. That voice actress was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. We've heard a lot of stories about Liz, and we're hoping soon we can get her as a guest on the show.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and as for me, I really did enjoy this episode. I'm going to have to give it a yay as well. And you know what? In my personal opinion, even though I wasn't really too crazy about I Spy a Witch, in a sense, I kind of wish this would have been the Halloween episode. Because it does have that, like you were saying, Eric, it has that horror aesthetic, in the woods, feeling something like Friday the 13th or something, or Blair Witch Project, in which they're wandering in the woods. And yeah, I do kind of feel that creepy atmosphere, and it's just so surreal to see a lunatic appear in an episode of a show that's mostly grounded in real life. I mean, sure, Joann can be a little bit irritating at points, but, when you have somebody as irritating as her being dropped off in the middle of nowhere, especially with her being responsible for taking care of a bunch of kids, and especially one that she can't stand, and, I kind of don't blame her for that, especially when she gets really sick from the food poisoning from the clams. So... And of course, we have some great moments with the other characters as well. It does, and of course, as mentioned before in our podcast episodes, we always love the episodes in which both of the plots pull together as one, as opposed to being separated. So yeah, I enjoyed it, so I'm going to give it a yay as well. So that's it for this week's episode of We're in Between. So yes, Eric, thank you so much for joining on the podcast. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So yeah, do you have anything to plug or self-promote? Where can people find you at?
Yeah, so I left animation a long time ago. I liked it. I just felt, in the end, I just felt like I was more kind of verbal and more, interested in writing than I was drawing. So anyway, I ended up going into public radio, and now I have a podcast called Imaginary Worlds, which is on the Panoply Network. It's about sci-fi and other fantasy genres, and it sort of takes a public radio style approach to those different genres. And every other week, there's sort of like about a 25 to 30 minute episode.
All right, that sounds
Awesome.
great. So yeah, I'll definitely leave all the links in the description box below for everybody to check out.
Cool.
All right, so yeah, that is it for this episode of War in Between. Tune in next week as we're going to be reaching the halfway point of the series, talking about episode 30. Yeah, that's crazy. We've been doing this podcast for 6 months, and now we've reached the halfway mark. Yeah, so tune in next week as we talk about episode 30. Hope to see you around soon, and thank you for listening.